All right, welcome to the Maher Show with Zack Hamm and Luke Lagor as my guest today. Zack is a financial planner, and Luke is in the finance industry as well and a commercial real estate agent. Today we're just going to talk a little bit about the chaos going on, the markets, kind of our opinion on what's going to happen, and hopefully give some peace of mind to what exactly is going on, give some context in kind of a more professional manner, not really like the scare tactics that we're seeing.
Of course.
Yeah.
All over the media and just this fear mongering that's going on with like the markets. And I think that more than anything, there's going to be a bunch of opportunities. I mean, what do you guys think as far as like the opportunities that are going to be presented here in the coming months?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you put yourself in a position, there's definitely opportunities out there. One of the things that we always talk about and try to focus on, I think Luke and I were even just listening to Money Mastery the Game by Tony Robbins on the way over here. And a lot of it comes down to making sure that you have controlled and put yourself in a position where you can take advantage of opportunities like what's going on in today's market.
Right.
A lot of times we see that, unfortunately, just with people's spending habits alone, they dig themselves into the hole where these opportunities arise and they're not able to take advantage of them. I think for those people who have done a great job and have kind of controlled what's in their control, they have good spending habits, they're not over leveraging themselves, they've got a good amount of cash reserves to where they feel comfortable being able to, put their money into investments, whatever that is, whether it's the market, real estate, etc. These could be definitely times of great opportunity.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's something that I actually talked about in a different video. I was saying now might be the time to just take some time to learn what's going on in the markets, and then on the next downturn, try and invest then. Like now's the time to read some Warren Buffett, some Charlie Munger, some stuff like that.
Yeah.
Understand what's going on, and then you'll be primed for the next time. Don't just jump in and think like, oh, I like this company, so let me buy some stock.
For sure.
Which I see that my mom texted me like 5 companies that she likes.
Oh, I've been
She's
getting
like, look at
blown
this
up.
stock, and I was like, yeah, but who knows what the finances are, of that company.
Right.
Yeah.
No, you bring up a really good point, and that's something I don't think a lot of people recognize, especially people our age. This is really the first time we've ever been able to experience what we would consider a recession or a downturn in the market close to 20%, especially this rapidly. But what they don't recognize is there's been over 52 recessions throughout the time of the market being open, the stock market in which I'm talking about. So there's going to be plenty of more, especially for individuals in our position with our time horizon. So I agree with you on that point. I think if you can learn and take the time to either connect yourself with a professional who has your best interest in mind, or just pick up some books, pay attention to what's going on, learn more fact-based information, not just what's in the media, you can put yourself in the position, maybe you're not there now, but maybe you'll be there when that happens, whether it's 10, 15, 20 years down the line. Maybe it's 5 years, next year, who knows?
One problem that I do see with people who do invest is they tend to think that they know more than the professionals who, look at the numbers and understand what's going on.
Definitely.
So, I mean, have you guys seen anyone have some adverse effects because of that?
I mean, absolutely. These past couple weeks, I've been hit up by so many friends, family members on social media, same thing as kind of your mom, like, hey, what stock picks, what's going on, what tools and software should I be using? So you're definitely starting to see that. And I mean, just like any business, there's people out there that are do-it-yourselfers. I was actually thinking about this the other day, because you see it in your industry as well. When we talk about storage, there are people out there that are more inclined to do it themselves, but a lot of them are just selfers. They never actually do. So they're missing that most important piece when it comes to kind of connecting the dots. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of noise right now. And I think that's part of what's increased more of the panic, as well as people are hearing a lot from a lot of different other sources that aren't necessarily living and breathing what it is that they're preaching about.
Right.
And I think that's something that has created a lot of chaos.
This morning, Zach and I were discussing the greatest detonator to the free market is fear. In regards to consumer behavior. However, on the contrary, the biggest enabler is confidence. So this morning when we saw the Dow was up 11%, biggest historical increase probably since 93, something like that?
1933.
So I think if we continue to rise and see the economy growing and like continue to be stable, confidence will continue to go up, and then the market will recover.
But that lack of confidence is where the opportunities come in. Like I mean, I don't claim to know everything about stocks or anything like that. Like the amount that I buy is, the way I look at it is I won't invest anything that I'm like afraid to lose.
Yeah.
So I bought some stocks in a company that had like the earnings were close to 20% and had zero debt. And the price cut in half in the last month.
Right.
So I'm looking at all the financials and I'm like, there's no way this company's gonna go out of business with zero long-term debt. Like,
Right.
You know.
Yeah, as long
that's
as
where you
they're
see,
not
like,
making huge, errors operationally.
Right.
And that's a key thing too. I think we're going to interest environments where you're going to see a lot of business really diminish. There's going to be companies who have consistently for many years now, we've been in a bull market. The economy's done great. You're going to see a lot of companies that have taken advantage of that time and probably have taken advantage of it too much to where they've over leveraged themselves
Right.
and they haven't prepared for times like these.
Right.
And then you're going to see those companies, most of the time bigger companies or companies that are a little bit more tenured and experienced that have been through the '08, the '07. They know what that looks like. They were through the dot-com bubble, whatever that time was, they've experienced it. And they know that it's not necessarily if, it's a matter of when that's going to happen.
Right.
So-
I'll be really interested to see what happens to the advertisers like Facebook and Google who make all their money off of small businesses when these small businesses have no money to spend on ads.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. I think you're going to see a lot of, again, just like any kind of recession, I think for a minimal amount of time, hopefully, you're going to see business owners, smaller ones, probably have to either adopt new methods of doing business or go out of business, and then you're going to see new people see what they could have done differently, come into that business and be able to kind of adopt those new ideas and new changes.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of one of those always reoccurring things where you have businesses that don't survive and then you have new ones that are
Right.
created because of that process.
Yeah. As uncertain as it is, and everyone in the back of their mind is kind of like, okay, what's really going to happen? I tell myself the worse it is, the more the opportunities there's going to be. As sad as that is, that all these people are going to go down, but the longer it goes, the worse it is, the more opportunities there's going to be for the people who are prepared.
Right.
Or are willing to, hustle and not just like lay down and.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed on two big things. Either preparation, I think, is the one thing that's key, and it's the one thing that a lot of people, they want to jump too far ahead, especially when it gets into times like these. They immediately come out of the woodworks and things that they've never thought about before, like getting involved in stocks. It's something
Right.
that was never of interest to them. Now all of a sudden they hear the noise around it. They see the type of returns that people may be getting on a volatile day like yesterday where the market was up 11%. And if you'd bought in the previous day, that's could be a huge return.
Right.
And they see those times, but they don't question enough who it is that they're getting that information from. Again, because you have so many different people out there speaking, and maybe, we were talking about this the other day, maybe saying like, hey, Max, I had this kind of return yesterday. I was up, $20,000. It's like, great, but people take that information and that's all they know, and they try to repeat that or replicate it.
Right.
But they don't know what position that person is in. And to me, I think that's the most frustrating side of it, is because, don't get me wrong, there's lots of opportunities, but you could dig yourself into a bigger hole if you're putting yourself in a position to take advantage of those opportunities and you're not ready for them yet.
Right.
And they fail to take in the loss. The loss is, you were saying earlier this morning, people only want to talk about their gains,
Yeah.
whether it be in stocks or even gambling. But what's the net? What's the gross from your previous gambles? You know?
Well, and like yesterday, like you said, the whole market went up 11%. So by default, almost every stock went up.
Right.
So everyone feels like a winner, but it's like,
course.
really, that was just one day. That doesn't mean your decision was good.
Right.
Because tomorrow
No.
that could all be completely wiped out.
Absolutely.
So it's like, the way I look at it is, okay, if I make an investment, I have to be completely fine without looking at it at all for 5 years.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's just buy it. I don't care what what it does tomorrow, the next day, next week, anything like
No,
that.
it's a good mentality. I think so many people, and again, that's why it comes to the preparation and making sure my team always talks about is that your entire financial household is in order. There's multiple things that going into putting yourself in the position to where you can have that mindset and you can say, hey, this money that I'm investing, I'm not going to think about it. I know that I put it in some investments, hopefully some diversified, low cost that has a good reputation, is in some large cap companies that most likely will continue to thrive no matter what kind of environment we're in as an economy, whatever that looks like. But you have that decision where you make it and you just know that it's going to continue to go up and down, but this is a long-term outcome. And that's the kind of mentality that people want, that people should have. It's those people that get caught up into, I want to make a quick buck. And I think that comes down to every industry. My industry when it comes down to investing, your industry when it comes down to just running a business. When you have that kind of mentality where you're in it to just make returns quickly, I don't think things ever turn out well.
No, right. And that's going to also be the companies that end up failing on the service end. Because
Right.
right now, the companies that are going to survive the best are the staples, the things that people absolutely need, for society to run. And if you're one of those staples and you still fail right now, that means you've had some major, poor decision making in the past. Like you said, not thinking long term, because
Absolutely.
all the good companies are going to ultimately survive. As long
Right.
as they're not over leveraged and they're offering a good service. And if anything, we were talking about this, they're going to thrive because they're going to be in a position to grab up that market share from the people who were doing a poor job.
Well, and the companies that we talk about, even if they're maybe not thriving during this time, because, let's be honest, a lot of the companies, like even travel agencies, hotels, those companies are being impacted dramatically during times like these.
Right.
But if they put themselves in the position, and again, I can't harp on this enough, to control what's in your control. You can control your spending. You can control your debt. Those are the two main things that if you can build a good foundation upon, you can maybe not thrive during this environment, but once this is all done and over with, you'll be in a position to where your competition is less, and you have more opportunity to take on business and work with people who maybe weren't there beforehand.
Right. So what's some like common questions that you're getting asked from your clients that are like worried about what's going on, and like how are you addressing it?
I would say from our clients, a big thing that we try to do, and we've been doing this for many years now. So clients that have come on and been working with us, the biggest thing that we find to be helpful for times like these is to be setting them up and preparing them for times like these. Right. So having those conversations before they happen. So we've been doing that now for, depending on how long that client's been with us, for many years, where we're sitting down, we're looking over their portfolio, we're reevaluating if they're in a time where maybe are they going to need those funds now a little bit quicker? If so, are we adjusting the risk tolerance that they have? Has that now changed to where maybe we need to adjust their asset allocation and they're not being as risky as they were before, because maybe they are coming into a time where they want to now spend that money to purchase a home, or they want to retire. And so, they don't maybe have enough time to ride out, what this market's going to bring us. Who knows? It could rebound within 6 months, 18 months, 2 years. You never know. But again, that comes down to that long-term kind of leave it and forget about it type of mentality. So a lot of those conversations we're having to just try to make sure that they still understand the main goal of why we invested this money, what bucket it's in, meaning, what bucket is this money allocated for? Is it for a home purchase? Is it for retirement? Is it for your kids' education? Because all those things have different time horizons, and really the time horizon plays a big role in what type of investments you should be looking into.
Right.
So we've been setting up that conversation for a long time now, showing them, again, a big majority of my job, and I think this is something that's overlooked, is education. It's a conversation, it's addressing their concerns, it's allowing them to understand what I understand so that they can feel the same kind of comfort that I have.
Right.
So that times like these, they understand I'm not going to sit here and say that my clients' portfolios aren't down. There's clients that we have that their portfolios are down right now.
Right.
We may have limited the amount in which they are down. Right.
Yeah.
We may have limited the amount in which they are down, but we've also had those conversations for the last 2-3 years, have shown them hypothetical reports as far as, hey, you're saying, and we're telling you, you need this kind of return in order to maintain the lifestyle you want to live, whether that's in retirement. That's what we're striving for, and that's the kind of portfolio we've built for you. Now, given that, you're also maybe going to take on more risk because you need a higher return in order to maintain that lifestyle. Right. So with higher risks, there comes more volatility in most situations depending on your investment. So that's another thing that we're having a conversation around is, hey, it's all fine and dandy when these past 10 years have been very good returns, and especially these last 3 years when you're looking at 25% returns here and there, that's great. But let's look at if the market does drop 30%. How does that make you feel? Like, let's talk about those times. Let's address those kind of concerns, because those are the times where we need to be there for you the most. And if you're, as an advisor, I believe not having those kind of conversations and being able to understand your client's fears, that's where you start losing business during these times.
Right. Yeah, I think the number one goal for, I would assume, financial clients is to not lose money. And the number two goal would be to gain money.
Of course.
So if you can address that above all else, I would assume that's, the way
right.
to go.
And again, like any investment, people have to understand that you're investing. This isn't, depending on the product, of course. I don't even like to use the term product, but depending on the investment and what you're going into, you're taking chances. Now, they're more analyzed and hopefully, I guess what's the word I'm looking for? The chances that you're taking are evaluated based off of your risk. It's not like you're just throwing money into thin air. You're looking at the companies and the investment choices that you're making, and hopefully those are aligning with what you want to accomplish. But at the same time, you are investing. So you have to be in a place where you understand that there's gonna be times where things aren't going your way. But if you can understand that and wrap your head around it and shift your mindset to be in a position, one, and then two, to understand that those are opportunities. Right. Especially for people who are younger, have a longer time horizon.
As you were saying that, I have a feeling that a lot of people don't think of investment as an investment, like making a good one versus a bad one. I almost feel like people think it's more like the lottery or chance. Like, am I having a good day or a bad day?
Yeah, I could see that. And again, I think the biggest fault is the lack of understanding and education that comes with investing. And I would say a majority of that is probably either the people you're doing business with or the industry itself. I think in a lot of situations, just the communication that should be there between you and your advisor is not. And I can't stress it enough. I think times like these where clients are freaking out and they're receiving a statement within 1 month to the next and their portfolio is down 30% and their advisor hasn't picked up the phone and said, hey, how are you feeling about this? Let's see where you're at. Let's run new reports. You're still on track. You're actually in a great opportunity where, again, you don't need this money for 15 years. So let's go ahead and reevaluate your funds, your position, your cash, what your spending is going to look like. Do you have any unforeseen bills that are going to come up that we do need to maybe save extra? Or are your spending habits going to be less now that maybe you're working from home, you have less overhead, you're not going out to eat as much because restaurants are closed? Where can we now shift things to reallocate that money in a place where it allows you to take advantage of these opportunities? And those are the kind of conversations that people should be having with the professionals that they're working with.
So do you have people actually track all their personal expenses?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That alone, I think, would solve most
100%
problems. Just seeing the numbers, like, holy, I spent that much money on going out to dinner.
Yeah, again, to me, it's like, it's basic, right? You start with the foundation. You start with your budget, your spending habits, your income. What's your cash flow? What do you bring in? What do you send out? If you're in a position to where you have negative cash flow, how can you ever expect to be able to make smart financial decisions? So yeah, we're constantly having our clients redo their budgets, going through what it's looking like. Are you having any kind of big life change? Are you going to have a baby soon? Obviously, are you changing positions where now you have to find privatized healthcare? Is that another expense that you're going to have in your life? So constantly redoing your budget. Personally, I don't think you can do it enough. Whether you're doing it on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, it should be happening quite often. And even if you're not sticking to it, at least it's bringing awareness in your life to where when you do go to swipe that credit card or hand somebody cash, it kind of brings a bell in your head like, hey, I just did my budget yesterday. I know where I'm at. Now I'm a little bit more conscious and aware of my spending.
So is this something that, like on a simple version of that, would you recommend people just have like a simple spreadsheet or?
It all depends on the person, right? Some people want to make things, I think, sometimes too intricate.
Right.
I think if you can literally sit down and just go over whether that's going through your transaction history on your bank account statement and saying, hey, what did our spending look like? We know we have those reoccurring expenses, whether it's paying rent or paying your mortgage. That's something that's happening. You have, whether it's HOA, utilities, water, sewage, those are things that no matter what happens, you're going to have to pay those. So tracking that, putting that in its own category of fixed cost, so to speak, and then trying to nail down and probably being more conservative as far as what your spending looks like on groceries. Do you like to go out and eat dinner a lot? How often do you need maybe new tires on your car based off of how often you're rotating? Like that happens every, let's say, 5,000 miles or whatever that looks like for you based off of how you're driving. So to go in and just kind of think about those things. I think a lot of things that have become convenient for us, like the ability to be in a subscription-based model, whether that's Spotify, Amazon, those are things that add up extremely fast.
Yeah. Right.
And
you can still budget variable costs, such as groceries.
Absolutely. I think
dinners,
you estimate them higher than what they would be.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you use ratios or percentages like, hey, your fixed cost shouldn't be over 30% or something like that? Or is it?
It depends on the
whole number.
Yeah.
Truly, like a dollar value, $200 a month, and like say spending like going out to dinner or like movies, something like that, like leisure activities, like budget that $200. $450 to groceries,
Right.
And then you have your fixed costs, as Zach said, with rent, utilities, and so forth.
Yeah, and it really depends on your income, right? I mean, some people will say, well, like you should be saving this percentage
a third of your income for rent or more.
Right, but altogether, I mean, it can differ depending on who you are and how much you make.
Right.
So that's another thing that I also see during these times, just that you brought that up. It's a great question, but that's another thing that I get a lot is these very generic questions. Not that yours wasn't a good one, but there's a lot more depth to that, right? And sometimes people want these cookie cutter answers without me having to kind of unravel what their individual situation looks like. And I think that's another thing to be aware of, especially during times like these, are people who are so easily there to just answer one immediate question and give you the advice that you need without actually asking you any other additional follow-up questions.
There's a lot more nuance.
So again, great question, but it really just depends on who you are, what you're trying to accomplish. Maybe you are putting away 30% of your income. Maybe you're putting away more or less. All depends on the lifestyle you want, what creates real freedom for you. There's plenty of people out there who live very minimalistic lifestyles. And they don't need a lot, and maybe they don't make a lot either. So their percentage could be different from someone who maybe does make a lot more, but also spends a lot more as well.
Right.
So,
and that's fair. That makes sense. If you're making $5,000 a month, the ratios or whatever should be different than if you're making $100,000 a month.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot more wiggle room for that kind of thing.
Of course.
So what are you seeing in like the commercial real estate? And because I was thinking like, I just got this warehouse 2 months ago. I was like, man, if this happened then, I probably would have had so many opportunities with these building owners who are trying to get their spots leased up quick.
Right. Well, I mean, in Chicago, the market has been booming, very stable past 10 to 5 years in commercial real estate, industrial real estate as well. But for right now, because of this, like acquisitions are on hold. No one's necessarily looking to acquire more land or develop new construction. I think what you want to do in a time like this is provide the best type of service. If you're a property manager, say this building, for instance, this warehouse, the real estate firm that owns this warehouse, I hope like their property management team would reach out to their tenants, see how they're doing, see what they can help out with, just so you can provide that service right now and focus on the people that you do have to try to maintain that relationship and keep them, as opposed to going out and acquiring new developments or new land.
Right. Yeah, the building owner did not reach out.
Right.
Yeah.
He's out of
Well, I
here.
love that you said that, because I think that applies to every business right now, and I think that's a huge point. And I see it especially in my business, because let's be honest, that's a more difficult task to do, is to pick up the phone and call people who you know might be struggling and have that conversation with them, because at some point that may open up the doors for them to say, like, hey man, I'm not going to be able to afford my rent this much, I'm actually going to have to move.
Right.
And so it's easier for people to put that on the back burner and just wait for you to get to a point where you have to call them and say it. So they're like, well, I don't want to do that. What if that opens up a whole nother can of worms? But in reality, if that person can bring more value and just kind of address those questions or work with you,
Right.
knowing that you're struggling, hey, maybe we are adjusting and we'll work some out along the way. It's the same thing with my industry too. That's a lot of the problem across all these industries. If you have people that they're almost operating cowardly, I would say. I know that's kind of a harsh term, but I truly believe it takes a real person who wants to do good business to pick up the phone and call the people who they're providing a service or product to, and say, hey, how are things going for you at this time in your life?
Right.
Is there anything that we can do to bring additional value or help comfort or address any concerns that you're having with the building or the portfolio or whatever it is that you're looking to get in touch with? So,
And especially in real estate, no market wants to see vacancy rates go up. So in order to prevent that, you just truly want, because in times like this, there will be businesses that do shut down and they'll have to move out,
Right.
So you want to hone in on that relationship that you have with your clients or tenants and just maximize that, as opposed to desiring greed or like new opportunities.
Well, I think you'll find by reaching out to people constantly, I mean, let's be honest, we're on a point right now where a lot of times you're going to have people, when you do reach out to them, for example, when you're touching base, and let's say your landlord is touching base and saying, hey Max, how things are going, like I know you just moved into this rather recently, or your business still doing well, is there anything I can help with? Maybe you are at the point where you're like, hey man, this isn't working for me, I have to actually downsize.
Right.
Well, if he's doing that for you and everyone else he serves, maybe he will get a couple people that are like, hey, this isn't working, I need to move. But he also may get a couple more people that he's generating new business from.
Right.
Where if he's doing that, you're like, maybe you were in
Yeah.
a different position. You're like, dude, I've already outgrown this warehouse. I got 50 plus storage units lined up in the warehouse, and I'm actually looking for another space. You have anything in mind? So again, I think just taking the time and being a genuine person to reach out to see how people are doing,
Right.
and asking those genuine questions open up new doors, and sometimes it closes doors at the same time. But
Right. And just being a person. A perfect
Right.
example is my last space. The landlord was like a large real estate management company. And I'll never want to have another space with them because everything was like so impersonal.
Right.
I did a build out, for instance, and they wanted to double charge me for it and said that I owed them all this money. I had to like call someone and break down the math that my math was right. They were arguing with me. Eventually they realized that, oh yeah, sorry, you're right. And then they like told me I could have X number of trucks parked outside. 5 months later, they're like, we told you you could only have this many trucks, but it was less than what they said before. I had proof of it. When I was moving out, I was there for 3 years, and I asked if I could give them the keys one day later just so I could make sure it was completely clean, and they wanted to charge me $500 for
Right.
for one
Yeah.
day. I was like, I've been there for
that's just
1,000
not
days.
good business.
It's like, I
Yeah.
never want to have another space with you guys. You're just reasonable.
Right.
They have spaces all over. I would probably search a space that they had if they're reasonable.
Yeah.
Right.
Zach and I have discussed what separates yourself from competitors is the type of service you will provide, not just performance in regards to investments.
Right.
Each industry has different aspects. So like a real estate firm, there's a finance department, investment committee that is responsible for the funding and like how this building will be constructed, so forth. But then there's the operations to it. And a company I worked for previously, the head of operations was an incredible guy. He was in touch with all the tenants and property, like all the tenants of the properties that we owned daily, like phone calls, meetings, like, hey, how's everything going? Like, we're gonna go check out the yard, like see if the yard even needs work, if the pavement of the Parking grounds need repaving. Are there wood chips on the sidewalk? Little things like that, just to know that you have us to trust, you know?
Yeah.
And we're happy to help you, and because you're helping us. It's a mutual relationship.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah, I mean, I'll probably say this 100 times in this video, but it just, to me, again, it's simple. Control what's in your control. You can control your ability to pick up the phone or go to those businesses in which you're serving those individuals and see how they're doing and service them to your best ability. There's nothing outside of your world or your life that's stopping you from being able to do that.
Right.
So
especially right now when things are a little bit slower for everyone, go back and make sure that everyone's completely.
And it probably is. It's more uncomfortable because people may be struggling, but again, it just comes down to, I guess, figuring out why you're doing what you're doing. You know, are you in it to just continue to upcharge people, knowing that your fees way higher than what you should be charging, or are you in it to see people flourish and see people get to these goals that they never thought were even fathomable, and create that for them, and them always look at that goal as something that you help them get to and not just something that they achieved on their own.
Right.
So I mean, again, it's kind of, for our business model, it's like, not in a bad way, but in a good way. We want to be there for you and provide you with so much service that you can't even operate without us. If we're doing that, we are putting ourselves in a position to where you need us, you value us.
Right. Not only are you doing the things that they expect, but you're doing the things they don't expect.
Right.
Because if you just value performance for your industry moving, like if individuals just want the job done, but do they want quality? Do they want human interaction, relationship, maintenance?
Right.
Can I rely on you for storage and so forth?
Right.
You're going to compromise something. If all you value is performance, then you're going to compromise the relationship and service that the company will provide you.
Well, and there's always going to be, I mean, you have both sides of it. And that's another thing, like we talked about do-it-yourselfers. Some people you can't please. Like there's going to be people, it all depends on who you want to work with. There's going to be plenty of companies out there that just want to do high volume, decent quality work, but it's more about just turnover. For each client they work with, they're like on to the next one. And then there's people who want to work with a smaller group. They really enjoy building those relationships and having those conversations. And they want to service you and make sure that they're involved in that whole process, whatever that is for you and your business.
Right. Back to picking up the phone, a perfect example of that is we call every single customer of ours after we move them. And we do like 1,200 moves a year, so it's a lot of phone calls.
Definitely.
And we didn't always do it. We started doing it just over a year ago. And when I first was asking my manager to make the calls, he's like, we're going to get more damage claims when we're calling these people, and you're going to get more complaints. And I was like, yeah, but the downside, or the flip of the coin there is, what if we don't know about it?
Right.
If we have the opportunity to fix it and we fix it, we're going to move that person again. Right. But if there's just an issue, and like I probably wouldn't call and complain, just if I had some service come in, be like, I'm just not going to use them again. Right. But if someone went above and beyond to fix a problem I had, then I'd be like, oh, I'm using them every single time.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and you're more inclined to
repeat business.
Like tell your friends or colleagues, like, hey, this is
well, that's what I said. If you're making more touches, it's really about the touches. Are you becoming more involved in being there and showing that you care for people? Look, it's part of the game. The more people you're reaching out to, if you're providing a business, some things don't always go as planned. There's going to be certain hiccups, but if you're addressing those and you're saying that, hey, I understand this happened and I'm here to help fix it, and I'm actually contacting you to make sure everything went correct, and not you having to contact me because you're frustrated, you just saved that relationship.
Right.
And they're like, wow, this individual really does care about me in this process. And actually, it turns out, Max, I'm going to be moving again. Unfortunately, I got to downsize. We need your help.
And my parents are moving out of the senior home.
Exactly.
Blah, blah, blah.
So there's pros and cons to it both. Again, you may stir up more issues, but I think more often than not, especially if you're working with the right kind of people, you're going to see that they value the fact that you've taken the time to pick up the phone. They know you have other things going on, and they know that you've already gotten their business. So for you to do that and take the time and really check in on them, I think it speaks very highly about who you are and the business model that you have.
Yeah, it's definitely about the long term. I mean, really, it's more just a good business decision
Right.
than anything. And back to the issues that happen, because inevitably in every business, issues that happen. I've come to realize that dealing with issues is actually like a form of marketing. Like there's a big
Absolutely.
opportunity there when problems arise.
Good way to look at it.
To fix it and get even more business. Like this happened literally yesterday. We had a couple pieces from some customer's bed that was accidentally left in a truck. And, we could have, they called and asked if we had them. We looked and we had them. We could have just said like, how many moving companies would have just said like, no, we don't have them,
Yeah.
throw them in the trash or something
Absolutely.
like that. But instead, guys got back from a job. We sent them to go install them and we brought him a box of chocolates.
Nice.
And he called back and he's like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks,
No,
And
that's
he's obviously going to use this again if he ever has to move because we
course.
just solved it and went a little bit above and beyond.
trust. You just completely gain trust there.
Right.
Yeah, that's huge. Definitely.
Yeah, I try to think about because price alone, I've realized like giving discounts isn't exciting. That's not enough for someone to tell their friend like, oh, hey, I got $25 off on this service. No one cares about that. But if you can go above and beyond and do something that they didn't expect you to do on the job, that will make someone
Absolutely.
tell their friend about it.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, price, you should already, if you're running and operating a good business and you have good intentions, your price should already be there. It should be fair. It should be reasonable.
Right.
It should be the right price for that person.
Right.
So to me, when you start discounting that, it's almost discounting the value and the service that you're providing. And again, some people won't understand that and they'll never be able to wrap their head around it because they're always consumed by price. And if they don't feel like they're getting a good deal, they probably won't work with someone. They rather have that feeling of, hey, I got a smoking deal on this. Yeah, the service wasn't great, but
Right.
that's what I enjoy. That's what brings peace of mind. And you're going to have people like that. But I think the people that we all generally like working with are those who find value in the service that we provide, and they really recognize those times when we're going over and beyond to pick up the phone or deliver them chocolates, whatever that looks like, maybe some toilet paper right now.
Yeah, that probably would have been better.
Yeah, and they're like, wow, I'm more than happy to pay that and support, Zach, Luke, or Max in any kind of business that they're trying to run because I know that they genuinely care about me, and I feel like it's not like I was ripped off for their price. Their price was definitely reasonable. I know that I shopped around.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't the lowest possible, but I feel confident that I've built a better relationship. I'll be able to use them in the future.
Yeah. I actually just read this book that's all about service marketing, and there was a whole chapter called Beware of the Middle of the Road Pricing. And basically what they said is pricing yourself in the middle of the industry basically is saying, well, our service isn't the greatest and neither is our price, so hire us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is that saying? You're saying
Right.
you're not the greatest, you're also not the best deal. You're really saying like you're mediocre if you're pricing
Right.
right in the middle of the road.
And that always blows my mind too, because it's fascinating to me, because there's plenty of companies that operate like that and they're very, very successful. And it just, to me, it reiterates like, look, you need to find who you want to serve. And maybe there are companies, maybe there's an advisor out there who don't bring the kind of service that we provide, but they could be extremely successful because that's the kind of people that they're working with, are people that have that lower expectation and they only want that middle of the line service. So doesn't mean that you can't be successful. I think you need to look down deep and say, hey, what do I want to provide? What
Right.
fills my cup?
Right.
And if it's just doing middle of the line work, go for it. I don't think that you can't be successful. It's just not the way that I want to do business.
Yeah, I just think that the point there was you're just not saying anything.
No, right.
By being in the
Absolutely.
middle,
I just always think it's fascinating because I see other advisors and I see how they operate and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I see that you're successful, so I know what you're doing is working. But then I also see their clientele and I'm like, okay, I understand a little bit more now. Like those aren't the kind of people that I guess I would want to work with.
Right.
I guess we just have different expectations, different standards, but it doesn't mean that you can't be successful
Right.
at all.
Yeah, at least somewhat successful.
Of course.
Yeah, it's obvious when you look at it like, okay, the highest priced person is probably the best service, the lowest priced person is probably the worst service, but you're getting the best deal. It's like easy to define both of those. the gray areas in the middle, like, what do
Yeah,
they do?
yeah.
How do they differentiate
Right.
themselves?
I don't think they know,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I think those people are in the middle because they don't know what they want to provide. Maybe they're still on the edge of like, do we go more service based or do we go more cut low cost, higher volume quantity? It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, the more that I've ran businesses, the more I want to stray away from the volume provider. Just more assets, more headaches, dealing with more people, less margins. It's just like, I don't really see much of an upside on that low volume end.
I think it's quicker. I think I think the reward on it's quicker.
It's easier to get started,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, I think it's an easier path. I don't want to say easier path. It's still difficult, but I definitely think it's something that can be tackled and accomplished much sooner than more of that long-term relationship building approach. I think
Right.
that takes time to build trust in people. And it can be challenging when you're working on those relationships or calling those people, whatever industry you're in, multiple times and having simple conversations and not maybe necessarily attacking them with, hey, here's my sales pitch. Maybe some of those other smaller companies are doing that and that's just how they operate. And maybe it's a little quicker, but maybe it's not the way in which you want to be remembered.
Right. Well, your business isn't very asset heavy, but one thing that I constantly
Right.
think of is the asset to income ratio. Like a business that has, and I've said this example 5 times on my channel, but a business that has like $1 million in assets to earn $1 million profit
Right.
is worth so much less than a business that has $100,000 in assets
Yeah.
that earns $1 million in profit.
Right.
So that simple math alone tells you want to be the high price provider.
Absolutely.
With fewer customers, fewer assets.
Absolutely. Well, and I think we were talking about this earlier. In a lot of industries, especially the financial industry, there are intricate types of products out there that have overcharged consumers for many, many years. And I think finally people have become more aware of it as they've started to learn and educate themselves, and they want the opportunity to invest at a lower cost. And now they've been given that opportunity. There's many companies out there that have the opportunity to get you invested and get your money working for you at almost no cost. And I think that's great for consumers. I think people deserve that. But now I think it's time that we work our way back up. And what are we going to do in addition to that? What kind of service or value are we going to bring to the table outside of just that low cost product that we're providing?
Yeah, what do you guys think is needed in the finance industry? Like, what is lacking right now?
I would relate it back to, here's what I would like to see. I would relate it back to similar to what you just said. So I think a lot of times when people, and I'm just speaking from an advisor standpoint, so client-advisor relationship, I think a lot of people go into it and they think about an advisor's success based off of how many people they're working with.
Right.
Because they think, well, if you have 300 people willing to work with you, I might be comfortable becoming one of those additional 300 as well. But I think a lot of times they're looking at it wrong. Similar to the analogy you just used, I think it should be more of go in and ask the question of how many people are you working with? Because I think if you get into that range where it is 300 to 400 and you don't have a pretty heavy team behind you to help service,
Right.
I think right there you can recognize that that person probably isn't going to be able to pick up the phone on a bi-weekly basis and give you a phone call,
Right.
especially not during times like these with this market being so volatile and you're trying to serve 300 to 400 people. So is that the kind of service that you like? And then the other way to evaluate that advisor's credibility, I think you could always ask him, how many assets he has under management. And I think if you get to a lower clientele amount and then a higher asset under management amount, I think that's where you find the balance, and that's
Right,
where you
yeah,
really
it's a
get to
sweet
see
spot.
like what is this person must be doing something well that these people are willing to pay maybe a little bit more, or that he's had the opportunity to invest with people that have more money and he's working with a lower amount of people to service them on a higher level. So
Yeah.
I think that's something that is always overlooked. So I would even push the limits to say I would love to see eventually maybe us getting to a point where we put caps on the amount of clients that you can work with.
Makes
Because
sense.
I
I mean,
think
ultimately, it's the number of relationships you can have, which
Right.
is not an infinite number.
right. So,
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily there's problems or things need to be changed in the industry, more so from an individual standpoint. It's the financial services industry is something that will operate on its own. It will be cruel at times and it will be good. But what does need to change is what Zach has been saying about control what you can control. And the analogy Zach and I were listening to yesterday was a type of spring cleaning, like clean house, not asking what should we do, looking at competitors or the market. It's what can we do internally. Control our environment from within so we can maximize our relationships externally.
Right.
Absolutely well said.
Yeah, I think that's something that I do, like almost naturally, blaming myself first. Like, okay, what did I do wrong in order to cause this issue that happened? And it hurts to think about, because I ultimately try, like, issues happen in business, and I tend to think, okay, every issue that happened is some ultimate result of me not planning or doing training or something that I did or didn't do that ultimately caused this issue. As much as you want to blame the guy who messed up and did whatever, there's something that I could have done differently.
Yeah, and I think you absolutely need that, right? Because I think you're your own accountability partner.
Right.
You understand that there's adjustments that could be made that could have created a different kind of outcome. And I think that's important to an extent, because you and I are very alike. We're probably all three very alike, and I've been at a point where I've created a better version of myself, and that would have been something that I would have beat myself up on constantly is what could I have done or said during that meeting or that initial introduction that could have changed the outcome of that relationship or that business opportunity. And look, it's important to go back and reflect and record or whatever you have to do to really analyze, are there things that I could have done differently, and what would those have looked like so that I can prepare next time? Again, putting yourself in that position where you're prepared for the next opportunity. Yeah. It comes across in all different types of cases in life, not just finances, but just business and relationships, everything in general. So I think that's a really good point. But like you said, it comes to a point also where you have to recognize that you maybe didn't do anything wrong, and that person may just not be in the right place.
Right. The problem is when whatever happens becomes a trend.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, if it's something that's happening consistently and it's not just, every once in a while, then you better look deep within yourself and say, hey, what is it that I'm not doing correctly that is maybe pushing these people away?
Or maybe not willing to do that you need to hire someone else to.
Absolutely.
Because I find that with a lot of things where at this point I'm just like, I don't want to do that anymore. So, who can I hire to do that thing?
Absolutely. No, but Luke made a really good point. I think if we could all just get to a point in our lives where we're not worrying about other people and what they're buying or what they're spending, trying to keep up with the Joneses, and we just focus on what we're doing. Yes, it takes longer. Yes, it's more difficult. It's a harder path. It takes discipline. And I think that's something that a lot of people lack. But if you can do that, it's well worth it. You're more appreciative, you have more peace of mind, your happiness. You don't start to worry about some of those things that you used to worry about when you're trying to keep up with everyone else. You just focus on what's in your control.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of that comes down to comparing yourself to the most successful person in your age group, which I think is a bad way to look at it. I think if you're going to compare yourself to someone, you should be comparing yourself to someone way further down the road because you're going to make better decisions. Because if you're like, I want to be like this 20-year-old who is, driving the Lamborghini, then you're going to make choices that are, more short-term in order to, to do that right now. But if you're thinking, I want to be like the 50-year-old who has whatever $30 million in assets, you're going to make different decisions today.
Absolutely.
In order to get to that
and
point.
Not only compare yourself to others, but I would say put an emphasis on comparing yourself to the best version of yourself or what you want to be. So many people look at others or look at social media and ask for or desire that type of lifestyle, but ask yourself what's important to you. What are your values? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And try to become the best version of yourself. And by comparing yourself to that person, you slowly see yourself becoming that.
Right. Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with comparison. It depends on how you're comparing yourself. Are you envious? Are you looking at that person saying, hey, I see what Max has and I deserve that, I'm deserving? Because if
that's
that's
a
how you're
problem.
comparing yourself, that's a problem.
Right.
But if it's like, hey, I have a friend who's much more successful in my group and I compare myself to him all the time as far as what he's doing to get himself to that
Right.
point, what he's done to get him to that self, I don't think there's a problem with comparing yourself as long as you know that there's things that you can take from that comparison.
Yeah, if you're thinking more in terms of like, okay, what would Zach do in this
Right.
situation? Then it's
I think that's fine, but again, you're in a more positive mindset. You've
Right.
shifted your mind to understand that you don't know everything,
Right.
and that you've surrounded yourself with people who are in a place where you'd like to be, and you're going to constantly compare yourself to them because they're obviously doing something right.
Right.
And to me, that's fine. It goes back to Luke's point when you're comparing yourself and saying, I deserve that or I want that. But then when you take a step back, it's like, what are you doing to get there?
Right.
And if the answer is nothing, well, then you don't deserve that. So
Yeah, I think the admitting that you don't know everything is huge. Because
Yeah.
there's so many people that I know that like refuse to even like read books because they feel like I already know what's going on. Like I don't need to read that. Like I just see that more and more and more in especially younger people. I think it comes down to entitlement and just feeling deserving and just feeling like, oh, I know what to do, or someone who comes into a new job. And the new person feels like they know more than the guy who's been there for 20 years. And it's like, where does that come from?
I think to me, it comes from a lack of struggle. I think you become more closed-minded. I think even more successful people, and I think that's why people with more experience and are a little bit older, they do start to become more closed-minded as they get up into those higher age ranges. And I think that's just natural because they feel as if they've experienced more and they do know more, which they probably do. But I think if you experience and you have more struggle, I think that creates this open-mindedness that you're like, I don't know everything. Obviously, I don't know everything. I just had to go through this challenge and I had to make sacrifices and I struggled. So how can I avoid that? So I think struggle definitely creates a little bit more of open-mindedness in my perspective.
I think that's something that you're good at is kind of manufacturing struggle. Like you're a super hard worker, you're willing to bust your ass on the track or whatever you're doing.
I'm just trying to
put
keep
yourself
up with
in
you.
that. In order to put yourself in that struggle mindset, though.
Yeah.
Like that beginner's mindset where you understand what it feels like to.
Well, I think you have to love struggle. I think you have to like struggle. It's something that I love. It's a big reason why I work out is I don't work out because I want to. Well, that's part of it. I'm not going to sit here and lie. But it's not necessarily just to build the physique you want. It's the pain that comes along with it.
Right.
And I think that's something that you have to learn to enjoy. And if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to put yourself in position to better your life and get yourself to that point at which you want to be. Because if you look at any successful person, I guarantee they have points in their lives where there's pain. There's some underlying pain, and there's whether that success is running off of either fear of going backwards or just loving the pain and they want to continue to push forward. I think it's there, and I think you have to love that struggle. And it's easier said than done, of course, but I think it's
no
something.
one wants to put themselves in that situation.
Right.
Or
I think
get up at 4:30 to go run the track.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think you put yourself in that mindset and then you stay consistent with it.
Yeah.
And I think the sky's the limit at that point. I think there's very few things that can stop you.
Right. Yeah. How many people right now during this quarantine chaos is not going to the gym because they're like the first excuses are like, well, the gym's closed. There's no way I can work out. You know?
Yeah, and I think that comes back to mindset. You're going to have hurdles that you have to jump over, but at the end of the day, you have to know what's important to you. Like Luke said, you have to know your values. You have to know what's important to you. I don't care what's going on. I'm going to find a way to still stay active.
Right.
If they shut down the whole state and say I have to stay in my house, that's fine.
Right.
Like you'll come in and see me doing pull-ups off the fireplace. I don't care how I have to accomplish it. It's just going to happen. And that's not something I have to talk myself into. I've done it just so long now and stayed consistent with it where it's second nature. And I think that's just the mindset you have to create in a lot of different avenues of life.
Yeah, going back to, I mean, I'm right in the middle of this powerlifting program that I was doing until this like gym shut down. And then it's like, okay, gym shut down, then I switched back to like long distance running, and I've just been doing like long runs every other day instead. It's like,
That's awesome.
All right, we'll just, kind of go with the flow and get
Right.
it done. And then once the gyms are open again, I'll go back to that.
But that's, again, it's a mindset thing. Like, that's uncomfortable for you to have to shift. You get your sights set on something, and then you have to, like, all of a sudden I have to shift and do something else. But I know you're the same way as me. Is like, it wasn't an option. It was like, hey, I have to do something else because I love this and I want
too much energy also.
Yeah, right.
No one wants to deal with me if I'm not really
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But again, it's being able to put yourself in uncomfortable positions. If you can create pain and become used to that pain, those times that are painful outside of the pain you've created in your own life are less painful. I know there's a lot of pain used there, but
yeah, I try to be really empathetic of that because it's all about your frame of reference. I know in the past, even just a few years ago, I would judge people on like complaining about having a long work day or something like that. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, like, I just worked like 15 months straight. Like that's not like it's instinct to think that. But then I'd like to think that I've gotten to a point now where I'm like, okay, it's all based on a frame of reference. The amount of pain, the amount of pain that they're feeling probably is a lot higher than the amount of pain that I would feel in that. But it's not wrong to feel feel like that. That's just that's on.
And it's hard not to have that judgment, especially when you're going through those times where you feel like you're doing more than others. I unfortunately struggle with something where I don't ever feel like I'm doing enough. And that's just some battles and demons I have to fight internally. But it definitely keeps me motivated and driven. But, Luke and I were talking about this the other day with some people within our friend groups. They just have a different lifestyle. And some things that are more challenging to them, we look at like, why are you complaining about that?
Right.
But if they've never faced the challenges that we've had to, and I don't even want to say that I've had a lot of challenges within my life because I've been very privileged, but when you've never experienced that, you have no reference point. So it's all perspective. If they've only constantly had to struggle with getting out of the car and filling up their own gas tank, and that's something that is frustrating to them, you having to replace your whole motor because it blew up and do it all by yourself is something completely different that they'll maybe never have to experience or have never thought about.
Yeah,
so.
I think that's why it's important to manufacture the struggle. Like I'm at a point where I can be perfectly comfortable. I can, all my bills are paid. I don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. And I don't have to be in a situation where I'm struggling. So it's important that I put myself in, those situations and I enjoy it. Working long hours, working out hard, whatever.
Well, and I think once again, you can shift your mindset to understand that struggling is an additional experience that is creating more credibility and really fine-tuning your skill. When you struggle, you're at a point where you're having to deal with a problem that maybe you've never experienced before. And when you do that, let's say 10,000 times, as they say, you now become an expert on how to handle that typical struggle that other people have.
That's interesting.
So you manifest that into a skill set. And there's been times where I look back on people that I've prospected or tried to capture their business, and I look back now and I'm like, thank God I didn't. Because I've had to struggle and go through different circumstances and situations where now I would be able to service them, but before I wasn't prepared. I hadn't had enough struggles or challenges in my life to be able to actually take on that responsibility.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's like an expert at being a beginner.
Yeah,
it's kind
absolutely.
of interesting. Yeah, I've never thought about that. Yeah, that's really cool. Just being really good at learning, I guess, or pushing those beginning stages are just,
I mean, I think you have to be really interested, intrigued in learning and bettering yourself constantly, like you talked about. I mean, to me, that's crazy to think about people who don't want to pick up and read books. And I don't read enough books, but I mean, Luke can probably attest to this. Like even on the drive over here, every chance I get, I'm trying to stay further informed with what's going on with the economy, the market, working on myself personally. How can I make sure to continue to maintain my same composure and get better?
Right.
And it's constant. It never changes. And again, it's become habit now where there's things that are in my routine every single day that I do to put myself in that positive mindset and continue to stay there and build myself up. but you have to be putting in the effort too. You could easily be, listening to something else or just tuning into music, which there's nothing wrong with music, but is it going to inform you and educate you further than tuning into maybe a podcast like this where we're learning about different people's perspectives and experiences? So,
is there anything that you guys have listened to or read recently that you were like, dang, that was like blew my mind, that was game changer?
I told Luke this, we were listening to it on the way
what
here.
We were listening to yesterday. I mentioned it earlier, the spring cleaning, like cleaning
Oh,
house.
the Darren Hardy.
And it was cool because in a time like this with the pandemic and all the hysteria, like it's applicable, but not only is it applicable to extreme situations where you can't control your external environment, but it's something anyone should do, like reevaluate what you're doing at the end of the month. You know, you can do it by week. You can clean house weekly, daily, and hearing that like gave me a new perspective into like how I want to approach things from here on out.
So that's reevaluating what, like your goals, your finances, what exactly?
I think it's just reevaluating what you can do internally to maximize the relationship with your external environment, whether it be relationships, business, performance even.
So it's just taking a look at like, hey, am I filling all these buckets basically?
Filling all these buckets, and what can I do to fill even more, Put more into the basket that will maximize my aspirations, what I want to do.
Do you have an example of like what you have done or what you'll change? Like obviously you've thought about this a little bit.
It was just yesterday.
Just yesterday, yeah. But I mean, even today, like during our workout, like no quitting, and then doing this podcast this afternoon, stepping a little bit out of my comfort zone. I'm still learning. I'm a young kid, like still learning and trying to grow within an industry I love. So this is like new for me. Really cool experience. Great. Yeah, thank you. So I'm just trying to like step out of my comfort zone and find myself within.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
You're already on track, it sounds like. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
We had someone have a spiritual awakening looking at this space poster a couple weeks ago. He was like, I feel enlightened.
It could be a little trippy.
Back. Yeah.
That's
so
cool.
Is there anything that you'd read or listened to recently that you blew your mind?
I got to harp on Darren Hardy, who is someone, again, he's part of my routine every single morning. He's a little cheesy here and there.
I tried listening to it, and it just was.
It's some people it's not a good fit for. For me, like there's certain tad bits that he talks about that really hit home with me. And again, there's plenty of people out there that are producing content that can definitely change your world.
Right.
So find what's good for you. I'm not saying what's good for me works for you by any means, but he's someone that I listen to almost every single morning. Just feels like he gets me into that right mindset. But again, a good book that we're listening on the way here that I'll probably listen to many times. Because it's funny, a lot of people say like, well, I've read that book once. And it's like, how much do you really retain when you read a book once or listen to it once? I mean, realistically, especially for this book, based off of it throwing out so many facts, if I want to really be able to put those in my arsenal so that when I'm having conversations with people, I can throw out little tad bits, which I love to be able to do, especially if they're true facts. I need to read that book and listen to it probably 3 or 4 times.
I mean on our way here, he discoursed on 3 major financial burdens for many people.
But it's a 32-hour book. I mean, it's something I've been listening to for a few months now, here and there while I'm driving. But it's Money Master the Game by Tony Robbins.
You could listen to that portion 4 times in one day and still have trouble comprehending what's going on.
Absolutely. Not that it's extremely intricate, but it's just there's so much value there.
You can take from it. Yeah.
I mean,
it's that's something that I recently started doing. Is when I'm reading a book, I'll earmark the pages that I like a lot, and then I'll go back, and it's a huge pain, and I never want to do it, but I'm always glad afterwards. So let's say, like I just finished a book 2 days ago, and I did this. I think I had earmarked like 18 different pages that I really liked. Then I'll go back, read that page again, and then I'll write about.
Nice.
I'll write what that page was about, and then what I like pick up from it, and then I'll just turn it into like a blog post. It takes like 2 hours to do, but I'm making some kind of content out of it. But it helps so much and like firm up those concepts, because just reading it a lot of times isn't enough, at least for me to, really have to think about it.
Well, and I don't have like a super photographic memory or anything like that. I mean, I play football, I had a few concussions, so my memory's probably worse than most. So, but I like being able to read something and really being able to remember it. Mm-hmm. I don't want to just read something to read it and then, a week later I don't necessarily remember what exactly we talked about.
Right.
Yeah. Again, I want to be able to use it in my arsenal for when I speak and communicate, and I think that's something that's huge too. If you can add those things. They don't necessarily always have to be your own words, but you can articulate or change that message so that it relates to the people in which you're speaking to. I mean, to me, that's huge. Mm-hmm. But it definitely, sometimes it takes a little bit more time depending on who you're talking to.
Well, and if you're listening to a book while driving or something, it's hard.
If you're multitasking, definitely.
Pick up all that. I know a lot of times when I'm listening to a book, I'll pause it and then like try to deliberately like think about what was just said. And it helps a little bit, but still, like, I lose a lot of what.
Absolutely.
You can easily not pay attention for a minute in an audiobook and be like, what is going on,
Mm-hmm. Right.
I find myself doing that.
Definitely.
But I've had a lot of success with writing down my thoughts on something. It really kind of, like, solidifies it. I've only done it for, like, 3 books now, but it's been a good practice so far. So
that's huge.
I'll probably keep doing it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I remember in college, actually, I'm actually the opposite in a way. In college, my fiance and I were in some of the same classes together, lecture courses, and I wanted to pay attention because I need to visualize and almost see that person's lips moving to understand and comprehend what's going on. Where she's the kind of person, well, she'll write it and she'll be looking at what she's writing and she's able to comprehend it and retain that information differently. But I'm the opposite, where if I'm writing something down, typically if I were to just pay attention the first time to what they're saying, I tend to grasp it much quicker than writing it down and then reviewing it therefore after.
Yeah, I definitely remember the best reading something. Like, I remember in classes where we had to read like the textbook.
Yeah.
It was always the easiest for me versus like watching someone teach it. Like, I don't know, I could always remember, the page pretty well. I remember, in like middle school, high school, you'd have open book tests.
Yeah.
So I would remember all I would have to do was read like a chapter once, and then you're doing like the open book test, and I'd see a question, and I could remember the shape of the words on that page, and just be like, boom, there we go, and just remember
That's
it
awesome.
like that way. That was always the easiest way, but like listening never could like stick that as well.
I don't know, it's been a minute since I've taken the test.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
Well, it actually hasn't
That's
been
for
that
sure.
long, but
That's a good point. I can't remember the last test I've taken. Had in college 6 years ago.
last test I took was for another accreditation that I have, asset management specialist. So I had to take a test to become, to grasp that designation. But that was probably a couple of years ago now, so.
So are you done for the semester? Or is there not really a
No, we're gonna
plan?
start back up Monday, I believe, remote.
Oh, remote.
All online, which will be interesting. I've never taken an online class, so we'll see how I do.
I was always nervous to take online classes in school.
I know, because I'm a similar learner to you. I like to engage in a classroom environment and discuss things, have a relationship with the professor, like have someone see that you're interested
Dedicated.
and involved.
Right.
As opposed to online and just
That's a good point.
doing
Like
assignments.
the human element to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely, the teacher's definitely going to bias towards a better grade to the engaged student.
100%.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, we were talking about earlier with all these people who are working from home, and we think that it's probably going to stick, where more and more people work from home.
Yeah.
I think if anything, that's going to cause some problems with like social interaction. Like I feel like people need that to be in an office, like as much as a pain it is to get into your car, drive to work, you talk to Jim at the water cooler, he's kind of annoying, but whatever, you get back to your desk, you're dealing with all that crap, but it's like good for you to, have those skills. If you're just
we were
at
saying
home.
that, Zach was, before we started the show, Zach was saying how this situation may help our generation realize that it is possible to adequately work from home and perform well, and it might teach us to appreciate that we do want that engagement with other people and collaborative effort, and go into the office and work things through.
Yeah, it might swing back.
Well, I might even question what you just said to an extent and say, well, if you're in a position to where you enjoy working from home and you feel as if you are more efficient working by yourself in a more calm environment, you might push yourself on the weekends or whatever time that you do have to go out and enjoy those times where you're communicating with people in a place that you rather be in, instead of being forced to in an environment where you're at work or whatever that is. Because I think there's plenty of people where they get home and the last thing they want to do after talking with colleagues all day is go to the park and have a conversation while throwing the ball with their dog to someone else.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think maybe you have a more pure and enjoyable social connection with people now that you have the time to yourself to work on what you enjoy.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I could see it going either way.
Yeah.
But I mean, how many people actually are pushing themselves is another question.
Yeah. Oh, good question. Not many.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I don't know.
We'll
It'll
see
be
what
interesting to
happens.
see. I could see it happening where more people work from home, and then 20 years from now, it starts swinging back to more people in offices, and kind of goes back and forth.
Yeah.
Well, now, again, I think we may come to a point, too, where this creates more expansion. Because before, if you're working in office, guess what? That company has to have the space. But now if you can deploy, 20, 30% of your workforce to work out of their home, that's less of a facility you have to have available. And maybe you're now then growing that facility for the people who do need to be in the office working. And maybe that's more people who are in the manufacturing, so they're actually building the equipment to then produce that product.
It's definitely more efficient.
Yeah.
Having people work from home. That could affect the commercial real estate market.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Way
Without
less
a doubt.
office space, and
We were talking about vacancy rates earlier. It'll go way up.
yeah.
Maybe though, I don't know. I mean, it probably will, but I think you'll have more companies.
I think that would open up more opportunity for retail industries such as like restaurants or shopping.
Yeah, if it's driving prices down.
Yeah, as opposed
Retail.
to office retail.
Or maybe those companies are utilizing that space in a different way.
Right.
Is what I'm saying. Maybe a way which allows their company to produce more of whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, I definitely think it'll hit some people differently than others. Some companies, depending on what it is that they're producing or the services they're providing, they could probably downgrade the facility they're in dramatically into something smaller.
Right.
But something that's more manufacturing and product based, and they need the space to actually hold the storage or whatever that is. Say you have 2 employees that can now work from home. Well, you can knock out those 3 walls and now you have more space. So
Exactly, yeah.
you're just
More
utilizing, I
efficient.
think, the
It's more
space in a
efficient.
different way, and it brings a different opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for someone to figure out what to do with all these empty malls. Like, there's a mall over in Mesa that I saw a sign that was like 600,000 square feet available. Someone's going to figure out what to do with those.
There'll be a lot of rehab projects for sure going on all across the country. I think a lot of it will turn into multifamily assets. So like commercial parks, such as like massive apartment buildings where it's commercial or residential real estate from like the 2nd floor and above, and then commercial retail underneath these like massive parks, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Where there's like shopping, cafes, restaurants, and so forth. And then above it is the residential units.
Well, another thing we were talking about the other day too, some you kind of hit on there, is we're seeing that co-working spaces are becoming a little bit more popular too. So
Yeah, like
I
the
could
WeWork
see
space stuff, they're great.
I could see that those spaces become more of a compound for smaller business owners who are just getting started, or entrepreneurs to go in there and
And it will fall
collaborate.
on urban planning and I guess you could say like design in a sense, just trying to incorporate human activity with the surrounding environment. I know in Chicago, like you have a lot of those units, like multifamily on top, and then retail on ground level, so it's easily accessible. But in Phoenix, it's different out here. You have your subdivisions and urban sprawl type places,
Right.
and then you have just office buildings, and then your homes are in the subdivisions.
Right.
Yeah, I think the model of like the WeWork and stuff like that is just doomed to fail though, because if you think about like what's happening right now, so these WeWork type businesses are either buying buildings or getting long-term leases on floors or whatever, but then they're renting it out on a short term. and then something like right now happens, and they have these individual people in these offices.
They can all opt out.
Yep, they all opt out in 1 month. Now your building that was 90% full is now 40% full, and there's nothing you can do about it. You're not covering your fixed costs. So like, I think those in a good market, those are just going to blow up. But then in a bad market, they're all going to
They'll
go away.
crumble.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I see happening.
Absolutely.
anyways.
And it's such a new business model that, maybe through times like this and experience like this, they do have to adopt new types of contracts or new ways of doing business to hopefully prevent businesses where as soon as they have a little hiccup in their sales that they don't just opt out of the space they're renting.
Yeah, that's tough because that is the selling point. It's the month to month, like the ease of in and out.
Right.
So
I don't know.
yeah, we'll see where. I don't know if it is new. It seems like on face value, it seems like it'd be an awesome business. Like, oh, let me just lease this floor, lease out parts of it, and net 30-40% more than what I'm leasing for. But then you're like, could be bad.
But it's the same as like an Airbnb too, right? I mean, you have times like these where people aren't going to be traveling as much, and it's different from having a regular tenant who's renting out your home on a year-to-year basis compared to someone who you're hoping to pay a higher premium for a weekend stay. So
I had someone in here last week who has an Airbnb that he bought as an investment, and in that week he had $2,000 worth of cancellations because of this. So now he's losing money this month.
Right.
And March is the biggest month of the year in Arizona for rentals. So it happened in the worst month for him possible, like the month where he was hoping to recoup a lot of his investment. Gone.
yeah, I think that goes back to the thing we've been saying all the time: control what's in your control. You can't ever look into the future and count on things.
Right.
That's not how you should ever operate.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's tough when those crazy bets though are either the ones that pay off massively or
Right.
just,
Well, and that's where you got to be living to live and die by the sword if that's the kind of model that you want to have. For sure, and not saying that person won't survive, or even if they do have to pivot and transition, there's definitely a space for it. It just it comes back to what you're comfortable with.
And
I'm not
understanding
comfortable
that.
taking that kind of risk where I'm putting in a position to where I'm being held captive to the banks in which I owe money to pay for this property that I'm Airbnb-ing.
Right.
But it's all different depending on what your tolerance is.
Exactly. Yeah, I think this is going to be helpful for people to, kind of get some sense to what exactly is going on, and hopefully see that, there are some opportunities. And ultimately, I personally think it's going to blow over relatively quickly, but I have no guarantee on, what exactly is going to happen. Could get worse before it gets better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say at this point. There's so many new cases coming out. I think it's good that we're focusing more attention on getting the test kits there to the hospital so they can correctly evaluate who is being affected by the virus and who isn't. And I think through that process, which may be frightening to a lot of people because I think the exposure rate will go up, but I also think that will probably level out the fatality rate because I think right now the numbers are a little bit skewed based off of who we've been able to examine and who we've been able to determine who actually has the virus and who doesn't.
Right.
So I think those percentages will change, and hopefully we'll start to see, I guess not hopefully, but if more people do have the virus, but less people are maybe having very dramatic symptoms and there's very few deaths occurring based off of how many people actually have it, then maybe that will give us a little bit more comfort that this is something more similar to the typical flu. It's just a different strain. I don't know. I'm not going to say that's the case, but
I'm leaning more towards that end, that the fear of the virus is much less of a concern, or the actual impact of the virus is much less of a concern than the economic impact that's happening from all this fear. Like, I think that's going to be much worse.
Yeah, I agree.
All these people who are out of work, I heard that in like New Hampshire, the amount of people who sign up for unemployment went from 5,000 to 200,000 in 1 week.
Wow.
So it's like, that's 195,000 people who don't have money to spend on the businesses that are, paying taxes. And
Well, and at what point do you reevaluate that? At what point do you say, hey, we understand the impact that this virus is going to have on our population, but at what point do we have to say that people need to work in order for us to continue to be able to live in the kind of way in which we do now? These grocery stores and everything like that who are producing, the farmers, everything that's behind that, even the service that you're getting for your cell phone, like people have to be in the office working. So at what point do we
Right.
draw the line?
Yeah,
If we ever do draw the line to say that, hey, you know, we understand the extent to this virus and how it could impact our population, but at this point, unless we want to take ourselves into a position where we're like Greece, where we have negative interest rates, and we'll probably never, at least anytime soon, be able to work ourselves out of that to where people
Right.
want to do business with us, how do we restrain from getting to that point?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're kind of our own worst enemies right now. It's like the
I guess the good thing out of all this, at least I think, is it's not just us. It's China. It's you know, it's
Right.
every country is struggling, and I don't want to say that's a good thing, but at least it's not. At least it's not saying, hey, we did something wrong.
yeah, it levels the playing field at least. A little
yeah.
bit. Like we're not going to get left in the dust.
And
Right.
I think it will be Zach and I were saying this yesterday, I think it will be a V-shaped recovery in the economy. However, we don't know if we'll exceed new levels or reach new levels of real GDP. We'll recover, but we don't know if we'll expand upon what
Yeah.
we previously had. May take a while, but
That's fine.
as long as we recover,
Honestly think we were kind of due for something like that. I mean, going back to the
Oh,
commercial
yeah,
real estate,
right.
it took me 5 months to get this space because the
Inventory is
shortage
so
of
low,
inventory,
right.
just
Yeah.
the deals were crap.
mhm.
So I mean, there was something needed, you know, to happen in order to get.
Yeah, and I think again, based off of this, maybe it did prick a little bubble to where the people who are in charge of running and operating this country are seeing that there are little flaws in the way in which we're managing our money, because we already know it's there, but in a thriving economic space like we've been in for the last 10 years, sometimes you overlook some of those minimal things that can implode a plan if not addressed eventually.
Right.
So maybe this is our time to reevaluate that and change some of our habits that we've kind of created over the last 10 years.
Yeah, you can see it's an issue when people start lowering their standards for certain investments.
Right.
You know, someone going like has to check all these boxes for me to, you know, purchase something. They have a couple deals they can look at, and then those deals eventually go away as the market changes, and then they scale back their criteria. And it's
Right.
like, okay, that's when you know that something's, you know, poor decisions are being made. And
Exactly.
something's going to happen eventually.
Well, and that's you brought up a really good point just to address them real quick. That was a question that I got from a lot of people. It's like, hey, is now a good time? And I always try to respond with a question to say, what's changed in your life now that is making you feel that you need to get involved but didn't want to get involved 6 months or a year
6
prior?
months.
You know, what has changed?
Yeah.
Is it because you're seeing again and hearing a lot of noise around other people being able to take advantage or making those decisions now that you want to
Right.
get involved? Has anything actually changed? Are you in a better place than what you were? Because obviously a year ago this wasn't something that crossed your mind or that you felt like you were in a good place to do. So
Right.
don't make those decisions based off of what everyone else is doing. They're in a completely
Right.
different position. Evaluate where you are.
Yeah. For me, I have this like checklist of things that I look for stocks every once in a while, and you know, in the last 4 years, there really hasn't been much that I like. So it's like finally it dropped, and I'm like, oh, there's actually some things I can buy here, and
Yeah.
and you know, play around with it a little bit. And you know, obviously that's not my job. That's not how I plan to
Right.
earn money. But it's just, you know, kind of fun, if anything, to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks guys for being on. You want to plug your podcast? I'm wearing the shirt.
I see that. I
Twist
appreciate it.
Turns and Lessons Learned podcast. I'm
Absolutely.
actually on there. I think I was like the 4th episode or something.
Yeah,
like
I mean,
that.
let's see. Where are you at?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, you're definitely on. You were definitely.
on there.
You were one of the, I think, top 5 for sure.
Most listened to or
No, just like one of the top 5. Early, I guess the release as
first
far
5?
as the
I'm
first
in the
5.
bottom 5 most
No.
listened to.
Well, it's become a little bit more popular, but no. But Max has got a really good episode. We talk a little bit
Yeah.
more about his business. So if you're interested in that, I would definitely tune in. I mean, this dude's a killer. We've talked a lot about business, and you guys are both a little bit younger than me as well. You're 21,
24.
24, and you're 21.
21.
Yeah.
So I'm 26. Man, I got some work
Old
to
man,
do. I
yeah.
got some work to do for sure. But yeah,
putting
definitely
some
give it
heat
a.
under you.
I know, man. 30's coming up quick. I was getting a little nervous, but I better start getting after those goals I have. But
Yeah,
no,
so I'll link your podcast in the description.
yeah, I'd
here.
appreciate
So
that.
anything you wanna
I'm
plug
all
while we're
set.
here?
Thank you for having
He's
me.
all set.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was great. Check out the warehouse.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Good
this
business.
place is amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for
Thank you.
watching.
Appreciate it, guys.